Once, in a small, quiet village surrounded by dense woods, there was a rumor, a chilling tale whispered among the villagers about a cursed forest on its outskirts. Known as the Haunted Forest, it was said to be home to ghostly figures, strange sounds, and disappearances that were never explained. Despite these eerie warnings, some of the villagers dismissed the stories as mere superstition, attributing them to overactive imaginations or old folklore. But one fateful evening, a group of 5 close friends decided to challenge the legend. Driven by curiosity and a sense of adventure, they planned to venture into the forest to uncover the truth. These friends, Anna, a fearless leader with a sharp mind, Jack, a practical joker who often masked his fears with humor, Lisa, a cautious but supportive companion, Tom, an avid photographer with a thirst for mystery, and Sophie, a firm believer in the supernatural, gathered their gear and set out at dusk. As they approached the forest, the atmosphere grew heavy. The trees stood tall and close, their dark silhouettes forming a wall that seemed impenetrable. A cold breeze whispered through the branches, carrying with it an inexplicable sense of foreboding. Lisa hesitated at the edge of the woods, but Anna encouraged her to press on. Jack, as usual, cracked a joke to lighten the mood, though his uneasy smile betrayed his nerves. The group ventured deeper, guided by the faint glow of their flashlights. The once lively chatter between them dwindled into silence as the forest seemed to envelop them. Strange rustling noises echoed through the trees, though no wind stirred the leaves. "Probably just animals," Tom muttered, trying to reassure himself. But the forest had a strange way of playing tricks on their senses. Shadows moved where no one walked, and whispers seemed to come from all around. Sophie, clutching a small talisman for protection, whispered, "This place feels alive, like it's watching us." Suddenly, Jack screamed, startling everyone. He pointed to a gnarled tree where he swore he saw a figure standing. When they shone their flashlights, there was nothing there but shadows. Jack laughed nervously, claiming it was his imagination, but the group couldn't shake the unease that settled over them. As they pressed on, they stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. Its wooden walls were rotted, and its windows were shattered, giving it an air of desolation. Despite Lisa's protests, Anna insisted they explore it. Inside, the cabin was even more unsettling. Dust covered every surface, and cobwebs hung like curtains. On a table, they found a tattered journal. Tom eagerly picked it up and began to read aloud. The journal belonged to a man who had lived in the cabin decades ago. His entry started innocently enough, describing his life in solitude. But as the pages went on, his tone grew frantic. He wrote of hearing voices in the forest, of being followed by unseen entities, and of waking up to scratches on the walls. His final entry was chilling: "I am not alone. They are here. They won't let me leave." The friends exchanged uneasy glances. Lisa wanted to leave immediately, but Anna argued they had come too far to turn back now. As they debated, a loud thud came from the back of the cabin, silencing them all. Heart pounding, Jack cautiously opened the door to the adjacent room. It was empty, but the air felt colder, and an overwhelming sense of dread seeped into the group. Deciding it was best to leave the cabin, they ventured further into the forest. The deeper they went, the more distorted the surroundings became. The trees twisted into unnatural shapes, and the path they had been following seemed to disappear. Panic set in as they realized they were lost. Then, Sophie stopped abruptly, her eyes wide with terror. She pointed to a clearing ahead where a figure stood, barely visible in the dim light. It was a woman in a white dress, her face obscured by her long, dark hair. She didn't move but seemed to be staring directly at them. "Run!" Sophie screamed, breaking the spell. The group took off in different directions, their flashlights bobbing wildly. The forest seemed to close in around them, and every step felt heavier, as if the ground itself were trying to pull them down. Anna and Tom managed to find each other, but the others were nowhere in sight. As they called out for their friends, they heard Lisa's voice in the distance, pleading for help. Rushing toward the sound, they found her standing alone, trembling. She claimed she had been chased by something she couldn't see. Meanwhile, Jack and Sophie were still separated from the group. Jack tried to joke to ease the tension, but Sophie was too shaken to respond. Suddenly, a guttural growl came from the darkness, freezing them in place. A pair of glowing red eyes appeared, and Jack grabbed Sophie's hand, pulling her into a sprint. The group eventually reunited near a stream, exhausted and terrified. They decided to follow the water, hoping it would lead them out of the forest. But the strange occurrences didn't stop. The whispers grew louder, and shadowy figures seemed to move just out of sight. At one point, Sophie cried out, clutching her arm, where fresh scratches had appeared, though no one had touched her. After what felt like hours, they finally emerged from the forest, collapsing onto the soft grass of the meadow beyond. The sense of relief was overwhelming, but the experience had left them shaken to their core. They didn't speak much as they made their way back to the village, each lost in their thoughts. In the days that followed, the friends tried to make sense of what had happened. Tom developed the photos he had taken, only to find strange, blurry shapes in the background of nearly every image. Sophie refused to talk about the experience, and Lisa moved away from the village entirely. Jack, though still cracking jokes, avoided the forest at all costs. Only Anna seemed determined to understand what they had encountered, though even she couldn't shake the feeling that they had barely escaped with their lives. The haunted forest remained as enigmatic and terrifying as ever. The friends had survived their ordeal, but they knew one thing for certain: some mysteries are best left unsolved. For weeks after their escape, the group could hardly bring themselves to talk about what had happened. The forest had not only left a mark on their memories but also on their lives. Each of them dealt with the trauma in their own way, though none could entirely forget the horror they had faced. Anna, the natural leader, threw herself into research. She spent countless hours at the local library, poring over old records and folklore about the forest. Her determination to uncover the truth bordered on obsession. She discovered that the haunted forest had a history dating back centuries. Villagers whispered of witch trials, lost children, and rituals conducted in the dead of night. The name of the woman in white, a recurring figure in these tales, kept appearing: Eleanor. According to legend, she was a healer accused of witchcraft who vanished into the forest, cursing it as she disappeared. Anna's newfound knowledge disturbed her but only fueled her resolve. She reached out to the group, urging them to discuss their experience. But her efforts were met with resistance. Lisa, who had been the most reluctant to enter the forest, wanted nothing to do with it. She had moved to a neighboring town and refused to speak to Anna or anyone else about that night. The haunted look in her eyes when she last saw Anna told her everything she needed to know. Lisa was still running, not just from the forest but from her own fear. Jack, the jokester, masked his trauma with humor, as he always had. But his usual charm had a brittle edge now. He avoided dark places and flinched at every shadow, though he laughed it off as just being jumpy. Late at night, though, he would wake up drenched in sweat, haunted by dreams of glowing eyes and ghostly whispers. Sophie, the believer, became reclusive. She told her family and close friends that they had encountered spirits in the forest, though few believed her. Her arm, where the mysterious scratches had appeared, occasionally ached, as if the forest's grip on her had not entirely loosened. She began carrying her talisman everywhere, seeking solace in rituals and prayers. Tom, the photographer, buried himself in his work. The images he had captured in the forest were strange and unsettling: distorted shapes, shadows where there should have been none, and faint outlines of faces in the trees. He became obsessed with analyzing the photos, trying to find a rational explanation, but deep down, he knew there wasn't one. The forest had changed him. His once adventurous spirit was now overshadowed by caution and doubt. Months passed, and the group began to drift apart, bound by a shared experience they couldn't fully face. But Anna couldn't let it go. The pieces of the puzzle she had uncovered about Eleanor and the forest's dark history hinted at something larger, something she couldn't ignore. She became convinced that the forest wasn't just haunted, it was cursed, and the curse could be broken. Anna reached out to the others one last time, pleading for their help. "We have to go back," she told them during a tense meeting at her house. "Not for answers, but to end this. If we don't, the forest will keep claiming more lives." The suggestion was met with shock and anger. Lisa outright refused, her voice trembling as she said, "You're crazy if you think I'm going back there." Jack shook his head, muttering, "We barely made it out alive the first time. What makes you think it'll be any different now?" Sophie, however, hesitated. "If there's a chance we can do something, shouldn't we at least try?" she asked, clutching her talisman tightly. Tom remained silent, staring at the floor. After a long pause, he finally said, "If we go back, we need to be prepared. No risks, no splitting up. And this time, we leave at the first sign of danger." Reluctantly, Jack and Sophie agreed. Lisa walked out, slamming the door behind her, leaving the remaining four to plan their return. On a moonless night, the group gathered once more at the edge of the forest. This time, they came armed with stronger flashlights, protective charms, and a plan. Anna carried a map and a small bundle of items she believed might counteract the curse. Her research had led her to believe that certain rituals could sever the ties between Eleanor's spirit and the forest. The atmosphere was even heavier than before. The forest seemed to resist their presence, its twisted branches forming an oppressive canopy overhead. Every step felt like a challenge, as if the ground itself were fighting against them. As they retraced their steps from their first visit, they noticed that the forest seemed different. Landmarks they remembered were gone, replaced by unfamiliar terrain. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent, and the shadows moved with a life of their own. Sophie, trembling, whispered, "They know we're here." When they reached the abandoned cabin, Anna led the group inside. The journal was still on the table, open to the final, chilling entry. Anna placed her bundle on the floor and began the ritual, lighting candles and reciting the words she had painstakingly translated from old texts. At first, nothing happened. But then, the cabin began to shake, and an ear-piercing scream filled the air. The figure of Eleanor appeared in the doorway, her pale face contorted with rage and sorrow. The group froze as she pointed at Anna, her eyes blazing with fury. Anna stood her ground, continuing the ritual despite the growing chaos. Objects flew across the room, and the walls seemed to close in. Jack and Sophie screamed, while Tom frantically took pictures, unable to resist his instinct as a photographer. With a final, desperate cry, Anna completed the ritual. Eleanor's form flickered, her rage giving way to a look of profound sadness. As she faded into the ether, a wave of energy surged through the cabin, extinguishing the candles and plunging the group into darkness. When they emerged from the forest at dawn, the oppressive atmosphere was gone. The forest, though still eerie, felt less alive, less menacing. Anna believed they had lifted the curse, though the experience had taken its toll on all of them. The group parted ways once more, but this time with a sense of closure. Sophie found peace in her spirituality, no longer haunted by unseen forces. Jack, though still wary of the dark, began to reclaim his sense of humor. Tom published an article about their experience, using the photographs as evidence of the supernatural, though he left out the most terrifying details. Anna, however, couldn't stop thinking about Eleanor's final expression. It wasn't just sadness, it was relief. She felt certain they had done the right thing, though she couldn't shake the feeling that some mysteries would always remain beyond comprehension. As the years passed, the haunted forest became a memory, a tale whispered among villagers once more. But for Anna, Jack, Sophie, and Tom, it was a story they would carry with them forever, a reminder of the darkness they had faced and the strength they had found in each other.